Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Joe Glauber. I'm a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute and acting secretary for the Agricultural Market Information System, or AMIS. I'd like to welcome everyone here to the AMIS webinar on the challenges of moving grain and other agricultural products out of Ukraine since the war disrupted trade back in February. The inability of Ukraine to export from its Black Sea ports has sharply reduced grain shipments from one of the breadbaskets of the world, sending shockwaves through international food markets and sparking global food security concerns. While some of the grain has moved out of the country on alternative routes, export volumes are less than half of their normal levels, and the costs of shipping have increased significantly. If grains continue to be held in Ukraine, the country's storage capacity will likely be exhausted with the harvest of the spring planted crops this fall, as we'll see later in today's program. That will constrain farm income and the capacity of farmers to plant next season. Talks are underway in Turkey this week to try to achieve a negotiated settlement that would allow exports out of the Black Sea ports to resume. But even under the best of circumstances, trade will likely be disrupted for some time. This webinar will discuss recent efforts to alleviate Ukraine's storage and transportation problems caused by the war. It will also explore the challenges facing Ukraine producers in the country's grain sector, especially regarding the impact of reduced export capacity and higher transportation costs on farm income. I'm really happy we have an excellent panel today. We're going to start with Nikolay Gorbachev, who's the president of the Ukrainian Grain Association. Nikolay will be followed by Alexander Karaveset, who's the senior economist for the International Grains Council, and Lucas Dorenstein, who's the global head of operations at Viterra. Following the presentations, we'll have a roundtable with the presenters and two discussants. Aaron Collier, who many of you know, is an economist handling feed grains and wheat for FAO, and Seth Meyer, who's the chief economist at USDA and currently the AMIS chair. After that, we're going to have some time for audience Q&A, so you should be thinking about what you may want to put into the Q&A function during the presentation so that when we get to those questions, we'll be able to answer them. But let's get started. I'm going to turn it first to Nikolay, and Nikolay, I'll hand it to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for all organizers of this good webinar. I will try to share my screen just to show the presentation which I prepared for this webinar. And as you know that in Ukraine now it's a real war, it's not a joke, and every day we've got so many people who is moving from the occupied territory, so many dead people, but in any case, Ukraine continued to grow the grain. And on this slide, I would like to show our evolution of production, the grain, on the past 22 years. As you can see, this blue line, it's our volume of production. In 2001, it was about 42 million ton. And after every year, we just increase the production. And in past season, we grow a little bit more than 106 million ton, and our export potentially could be about 70 million ton. On this green column, it's our potential export. But unfortunately, the Russian invasion didn't give to us this opportunity, and we could not export such big volume as 70 million. And in the past 5 months, we exported only 5 million tons. That's why our export just 54 million ton on a past season. But in any case, our farmers continue to produce the grain, and in our expectation in this season, we will be able to produce about 70 million tons, and our potential export can reach 30 million. But it's more technically, because in any case, we still have stocks about 25 million tons from the past season, and with such big crop as we expect in this season, we will be able to export about 50-55 million. But unfortunately, logistic doesn't give to us this opportunity. On this slide, it's each of the block, it's 4 years. It's 2002, 2006, 2006 to 2010, and 2010-14. And here you can see on the first column, it's seeds area. On the yellow column, it's grain production average for 4 years. And domestic consumption on a green and our export on a dark blue. As you can see, that every year we increase our production and export, and we didn't increase much the seeds area. It's mostly because of the yield, which you can see on the top. This blue line is average yield for all products. It's oil seeds, wheat, barley, everything. And I just extrapolate this number for the future, and you can see that in our expectation, Ukraine could produce on the next 4 years about 116 million ton grain and oilseeds, and our export could reach 85 million ton per year. What happened on a past season and what we expect on this one? On this slide, I would like to show that our average seeds area on a past season was 25 million hectare, but in this season we decreased this area to 19 million ton. It's decreasing for 25%. And if our grain production in the past season was 106 million ton, on this season we expect produce about 70 million. It's decreasing for 35-37%. And what will happen with the export? Even such a dramatic situation with the war with Russia, and we export nearly 54 million tons of grain, but on this season we expect to export about 31 million tons. In this case, we will be able to feed up the world and our farmers will get some money. But unfortunately, for the moment, our logistic can give to us the possibility to export a little bit more than 2 million tons. We made a record in June with the export 2.2 million through points on a border, and with Danube River with the trucks, just 2.2 million ton. In this case, we expect that possible export technically can reach just 25 million. In this case, our stocks ending stocks will increase from 36 million ton up to 43 million ton. This map of Ukraine, and on this red color you can see that occupied territory by Russia. It's about 20-22% from the total area of Ukraine. I'm sure that the next speaker will talk about the storage capacity, but from all this storage capacity we have to just minus about 20% because all this territory for the moment occupied. On this slide, I would like to show the main productive area for wheat. As you can see, we produce wheat mainly on the south region and a little bit east. It's exactly the territory where now the real war. The same situation we've got with the barley, where the south region produce more barley than north and west. Before the war, we export more than 19 million tons of wheat, but in any case, on the past season, we export 19 million tons of wheat, about 6 million tons of barley, and only 23 million tons of corn. We expected to export about 40 million in this season. On a forecast for the next season, I put just expectation. 10 million ton wheat, 10 million ton of corn, and just 2 million ton of barley. If before the war we could export around the world, you can see how many ton we export. The main buyer was on Asia, it's China. After we export to Indonesia, on the Middle East, and of course to the African country. But after this Russian invasion, now we are able to export only to our neighbors in Europe because all our ports are blocked. And if before the war, since 1st of July, 2021, we reach export 46 million ton, and you see main export was corn and wheat. Now you can see that on the past 5 months since March, we exported only corn and sunflower seeds. I would like to explain why corn, because all international company had stocks, and now it's not a business, it's just evacuation of grain. That's why on a 5 last months we export corn. But sunflower seeds, it's the most profitable product for farmers. It's very expensive product, and for them more profitable to sell these oil seeds. And in our expectations that farmers will continue to export rapeseeds and oil seeds, but wheat and corn will still be in Ukraine. Here on this graph, I would like to show to you that our export on a previous season, and on a red, it's our export on a past season. You see, we could reach easily 6.5 million ton per month. We even had a record in November. We exported 7 million ton per month. And after this data just decreased dramatically to 250,000, after 1 million, 1.7, and our record in June, it's 2.2 million ton. And this 16 million, this volume of grain, which we could export, but unfortunately, we did not. About infrastructure. We've got so many ports in Azov Sea which we lost for the moment, and Russia even sent from Berdyansk vessel to Turkey with a stolen grain. But from Azov Sea we export only about 5% from total grain export. Our main ports located near Odessa, we call all this territory like a big Odessa. It's Odessa, Pivdeny, and Chernomorsk. It's Panamax port, which can load up to 60,000 ton vessel, and for us it was more useful. Of course, very nice port, Nikolay. There about 12 grain terminal, including Nibulon, Kovka, Bunge, and other international company. And we were able to make top up on Achakov. For the moment, we start to use Danube River and these small ports on Danube River. If before the war we had 1,200 inland silos for the total volume about 66 million ton storage capacity, and we transport everything to our seaports on a proportion 10% by barges, 65% by train, and about 25% by trucks. Our total port storage capacity about 5.5 million ton, and we had no problem before with our infrastructure. For the moment, our infrastructure looks like a disaster, because we still be able load from our inland silo about 700,000 ton per day, but unfortunately the bottleneck is a border, and doesn't matter it's a border by railway or bottleneck the same on a Danube River and trucks as well. We, even if we'll bring this grain to European territory in our pockets, the infrastructure of Ukraine doesn't give to us possibility to export this grain, because we cannot export through the European port such big volume as we exported before from Ukraine. For example, if from Ukraine we export 60 million ton, that Poland export about 8 million, Bulgaria about 6 million, Romania 25, all are together, it's less than Ukraine could export. Here on this slide, you see that 6 million ton, like average export per month before on the left side, and 2 million ton, it's our record in June, with a proportion of transportation. You see the main transport for us, for the moment, it's barges and river. I expect that increasing delivery grain by river for 500,000 ton on these months. how it's our logistic chain looks like. And you can see that now we are able to send grain, send barges not only through the Sulina on this number 3 line. Now we can go on a Girla Bystre, and it give to us opportunity to send about 4 vessels by Girla Bystre and about 4 vessels by Sulina as well. We just increase our throughput capacity there. And of course, it doesn't give to us opportunity to export more. And it's a good example when I say that, okay, can you imagine that if someone will block all ports in United States, what kind of export will be able technically to do USA through the Canada and Mexico? I'm not sure it will this number will reach more than 10-15% from the normal export. The same situation we've got in Ukraine. And our problem for the moment, it's not only technical, it's economical issue. Because even if we will find the way how to export the grain, the biggest problem is price for this logistic. If before we could export grain from any inland silo to the seaports and price was about $35-40. Now, when we export grain to Romania, to Constanta, it's about $160-180 per ton. If we'll go to the Gdańsk, Gdynia in Poland, this number will be even more. With the price for grain, for example, today barley in FOB Constanta about $280-290 per ton. With such logistic price, $180 per ton, farmers will get only $100 per ton. But price cost of production this grain about $200. It means farmers will not get even 50% from the price cost. That's why I am afraid that farmers will decrease their seeds area. And on a next year, we will have decreasing of production. And what will happen next? It will be too difficult to increase production on the next several years. It means Ukraine will produce less than before, and we will not be able to participate to this international market. And African country, they will purchase grain more expensive, or they will leave to Russia. On this slide, you can see the Ukrainian fields after missile attacks and problems that about 35% of missiles, mines and bombs, they didn't explode, and they start to explode it when tractors and harvesting combine are coming to the fields. And like a consequences, it's on this slide, I would like to show that on the left side, it's Port Nicotera in Nikolay, one of the biggest after missiles attack. Here it's in Nikolaev, it's one of the loading machine on international companies, and it's everywhere. And you see that our farmers who went to the fields and they just find these bombs and mines. They're now like heroes. You see on the left down, you see that here just rocket and harvesting combine. Of course, it's difficult, and it will give huge impacts for the next future. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. If you will have any question, I will be happy to answer.
Sorry, Nikolay, thanks so much. This was excellent, and I think it really pointed out, I think a lot of people look at what's going on in Ukraine and think of it as an engineering problem. That is, can you move that grain? And I think you answered very well that of course you can move it, but it comes at a very, very high cost. And unfortunately, a cost that is because farmers are price takers, essentially in a very competitive market. That means Ukraine farmers are the ones who absorb those costs. So let's turn to Alex. Alex, if you can.
Yeah, Joe,
share
if you
your
could confirm,
screen.
if you could confirm that you can see my screen.
Yep, it's
Yes.
up.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks for having the IGC at this event today, where we have an opportunity to show some of our work we do, particularly on Ukraine, and for obvious reasons, Ukraine has been attracting special attention of our team. Recently, we've done some work to understand more supply and demand situation, the current situation, but also look a little bit forward in terms of what is going to happen in terms of supply, not only supply and demand, but also the storage capacity in Ukraine. And I would like to present some results of that work today. And just starting with some initial assumptions to set the scene for further analysis, I would show first initial assumptions on storage capacity. I think Nikolay has just provided an excellent overview of the storage capacity situation, infrastructure situation, and the number that he mentioned. That what we have in our analysis is similar to that. So we started our analysis from the start of May. At that time, we saw that total elevator capacity in Ukraine was around 60 million tons, so 57 to be precise. And at that time, estimates from local sources were that around 15 to 17% of that volume were either damaged or destroyed or inaccessible because of ongoing hostilities. So that's around 10 million tons that should be deducted from that initial total elevator capacity. And there were also official and private estimates that there was around 23 to 25 million tons. Nikolay just voiced the 25 million ton number. We have 23 in our analysis. So this is the supply of all the crop grains and oilseeds that also need to be stored. So we deduct the 23 million and we come up with around 24 million tons of available capacity as of early May. So in terms of our analysis, some other assumptions here that we looked at the period from May to October 2022, which includes the 22-23 harvesting season. In terms of commodities that we covered is pretty much what we cover at IGC. So it's major grains like wheat, maize, barley, some other grains like sorghum, rye, oats, as well as millet and triticale. Oil seeds as well were included. The sunflower seed, which is a major oil seed, and as you know, Ukraine is a major producer of sunflower seed and sunseed products. So soybeans, rapeseed as well. Oilseeds products have been included into this analysis as well. And for numbers where we didn't produce detailed supply and demand balances, like for rapeseed meal, for example, we sourced those numbers from the USDA. And also pulses, which is a relatively new commodity in our coverage compared to other grains, and oilseeds. So that has also been included, but of course the volumes are relatively small compared to other commodities. And in terms of export assumptions, I will not go into much detail because, as I said, Nikolay has provided an excellent overview of infrastructure. But what we have assumed in this analysis is that exports will be done mainly through existing routes, which is by rail or by truck through western borders, or through the Danube River, mainly using river ports, Reni and Izmail. So this analysis does not assume for any resumption additional volumes from deep sea ports in the Black Sea. Now, in terms of assumptions that we use in our analysis, first for production. And I think these numbers, which I've seen in Nikolay's presentation, our numbers are broadly in line with what has been presented. And for production across the commodities that I've just mentioned, we anticipate around 66 million tons, which is a decline of around 44 million tons from the previous year. And for all the commodities across the board, there is a sharp decline from the average level and from the previous year as well. And much of that comes from a reduction in maize production around 17 million tons, as well as wheat, and in the sunflower seed production as well, a decline of around 7 million tons year on year. So that accounts for the bulk of the year-to-year decline in overall grains and oilseeds and pulses production in Ukraine. For consumption, numbers incorporated also indicate some decline from the previous year of around 5 million tons. This is mainly because of reduced maize consumption, mainly for feeding. For wheat, we assumed some decline in food use of wheat, particularly because of a large number of displaced people. But on the other hand, feed demand might be similar or even slightly higher because of ample supplies, and some grain may be fed not only in the maize market but also in the wheat market. So just to mention here as well that when we analyzed the oilseeds market, we also accounted for the production of meals, because actually crush of oilseeds does not necessarily result in a disappearance of oilseed. It's just a conversion to another product which also needs to be stored. So that should be accounted for in the analysis. But then at the same time, what is produced in terms of meals may also be consumed domestically, partially for feeding domestically, and part of that is exported. So some calculations have also been done in that regard in our analysis. In terms of exports, this is the trickiest part, and as I said, we assumed only exports through land and river routes. Overall, we anticipate a volume of around 31 million tons, which is also, I think, in line with what Nikolay presented. And this is just half of what was exported in the previous season. So major declines in line with production for maize and for wheat. And recently we've seen the prioritization of maize shipments, and Nikolay also explained the reasons behind that. What should be probably also highlighted here is the sharp increase in sunflower seed exports, and Nikolay also mentioned that, and that comes partially in replacement of shipments of sunseed product, particularly sunseed oil. So as you can see that the increase in sunflower seed oil compared to the 5-year average is more than 3 times higher. So we have seen large shipments in the past several months, which with exports in the previous season exceeding 1 million tons, and we expect that to continue in the season ahead. We also include here some soy meal, sunseed meal, and rapeseed meal numbers, around 3.5 million tons of exports, as we also assume that exports of those products will allow to free up some space for incoming grains from the 22-23 season. So now putting all these assumptions and inputs in, I would say, dynamic analysis of the capacity going month by month, starting at the beginning of, at the end of April, beginning of May, and the figure I showed earlier is 24 million tons. So before the harvest arrival, just this, if we assume domestic use on a monthly basis, of course, it's very difficult to estimate consumption even on an annual basis in current circumstances, let alone on a monthly basis. But yeah, here is an attempt to incorporate some numbers on a monthly basis, and just assuming some consumption in May and June, and also some exports. And these numbers are based on official statistics for May and June. So some space might have been freed up during those months before the arrival of the 22-23 harvest, and around 33 million tons of capacity is assumed to be available in June before the arrival of the first batch of winter grains, wheat and barley. But as harvests start to arrive, and obviously different harvests have different arrival periods, and we tried also to factor that in this analysis. Once these harvests are starting to come online, capacity starts to decrease as crop arrivals significantly exceed what is consumed on a monthly basis and what is exported. So by the end of July, it's 24 million tons. It reduces to 14 million tons as rapeseed crop arrives, and as harvests of wheat and barley continues in August, and then assuming arrival of sunflower seed in September and also soybeans, their capacity might be reduced to around 7 million tons. And the major arrival, I would say, is planned to be in October, when the maize harvest is going to be harvested. It's around 25 million tons according to our projections now, and that's when this estimate of capacity becomes negative. And the shortage of capacity by the end of October is now estimated at around 12 million tons. Now, we also did some analysis in terms of incorporating some increased export numbers. As also Nikolay mentioned, there have been developments in terms of access to the Danube River. Apart from the Sulina Canal, there has been a Bystra Canal that has been opened, and according to estimates, that could increase exports on a monthly basis by around 500,000 tons. If we incorporate that into our analysis, as you can see, I just moved the previous slide, and including the Bystra Canal, the situation doesn't change dramatically. I mean, there is still a very significant shortage of capacity. It reduces just from 12 million tons to 11 million tons. And on a larger scale, these opening of additional access to the Danube River is not likely to be a game changer in this situation with capacity. Now, also another exercise that we did is just looking at what should be the level of exports in order to avoid these shortages anticipated later in the season. So as long as there is an estimated shortage of 12 million tons, so that should be exported in the next 3 months, if you talk about August, September, and October. And yeah, this picture shows actually what should be the level of export on a monthly basis if we want to get to at least zero capacity by the end of October, or slightly above zero. Here it is about 1 million tons. So it's around 7 million tons. And that's compared with the number for June, which was record, but it was 2.2 or 2.3 million tons, depending on what commodities we take. So it should be much higher than even the record volume that was moved in June. And this is also around 4 million tons above the current IGCC forecast. And well, whether these 4 million tons per month can be transported from potentially reopened Black Sea ports is a big question, because previously, from the numbers that we saw, deep sea ports were able to move around 5 to 6 million tons, but that was at full capacity without any infrastructure damage and any logistical issues domestically. So these 4 million tons per month looks like a very challenging target. And if that's not reached, obviously there would be a necessity for additional temporary storage. We've seen in the market that there have been reports of additional storage capacity built in Western Ukraine, and also questions raised about the use of silo bags, for example. Yeah, with that, I would like to conclude, and I will be happy to discuss and answer questions. Thank you.
Great, Alex. Thanks so much. Lucas?
Thank you. I'll just share my screen here. Hopefully you are seeing my slide at the moment.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I don't have a whole lot to add after the excellent 2 presentations that we just saw. I suppose that's the benefit of going last. But there are a few things I would like to briefly mention. So this slide is similar to one that Nikolay showed, and it gives an overview of the logistics costs that are being incurred when moving Ukrainian agricultural products out of the country. We have, by and large, 3 flows. We have the flow via the Danube River ports in the south. We have the flow via the Hungarian border, and we have the flow via the Polish border. And what I see at the moment in the market is that there's a considerable amount of optimism about the volume of grain being moved out of Ukraine. And that's very understandable if you look at the efforts that people have put in, particularly the Ukrainians, of course, in getting infrastructure sorted out and temporary transshipment facilities built, etc., etc. It's an enormous effort, and by and large, they've been very successful, because even though exports are far lower than what they were when the ports were open, there's still a considerable amount of grain and agricultural commodities leaving the country, more than 2 million tons in June. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that there are a lot of companies which had or have goods effectively trapped in Ukraine. So stock which is at risk of being damaged by war actions, stock which is at risk of deteriorating, which happens with grain over time. And this is certainly true for the company I work for. We are executing supply chains which are not necessarily profitable in the interest of saving our stock. So I don't have an exact number to give, but I imagine that a considerable amount of the grain being moved out of Ukraine is being moved not because it is economically viable to do so, but because people don't want to continue running the risk of having stock in Ukraine. So I think that's an important point to mention. And like Nikolay pointed out very correctly, if the situation with these logistical costs is not resolved in some way, whether they're in the form of a subsidy for logistic costs or a subsidy for Ukrainian farmers, it will not be economically viable for farmers to grow certain crops. And the crops most at risk are probably the ones which are most urgently needed on the world market, such as wheat. So that is the point I wanted to add, and I look forward to the further discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas. That was excellent. Okay, so let me turn it to our discussants, Aaron Collier and Seth Meyer. And I don't know how you guys decided to break it up, but Seth, why don't I'll turn it to you and you can tell me how you decided to break it up.
No, absolutely. And thank you, Joe. And thanks to all the speakers here. Really fantastic presentations that I think lay out a lot of the issues here. And I've got a ton of questions, but I've got other sharp people here as discussants. So Aaron, why don't you share with us some of your big takeaways, and then I'll let you ask the first question because I got a list here too.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Seth. Yeah, these were some really great presentations. Thanks to everybody. I think some really important key takeaways were, I mean, first looking at production, just how much the war has impacted production in Ukraine already this season. I think Nikolay was mentioning wheat harvest down almost 40% from last year, barley down, 35%, maize also, I think, reduced by around 30%. And also looking at how much of Ukraine's cropland is still currently under occupation also already starts to kind of point to a likely reduced planted area for 2023 if the situation remains as it is now, just looking at a purely area-based situation. Also logistically, in terms of moving the grain around, I think it was really important to hear that it's not just a bottleneck situation at the border, but also from a cost standpoint, economically also, there are many factors that are impeding that situation. I mean, as Lucas, I think, mentioned, that they're moving grains even when it's not profitable just to save stocks. I know that, recently opening the Danube River pathway has been helpful in helping to kind of increase some exports. Recently from Ukraine now was recently exporting about 1 million a month, now up to about 2 million tons a month in June. So we've seen some movement, but as I think Alex pointed out, maybe not quite, it's not enough movement of grains out of the country to help the stock situation. I think Alex mentioned that Ukraine would need to export about 7 million tons a month between now and October in order to avoid an overflow of stocks by October. And I think that 7 million figure, I think Nikolay mentioned, was actually a record for Ukraine. So to reach that level again from the point that we're at now would be a really big challenge. So I guess, taking all of those points together, one question that comes to mind, and I guess this would, perhaps I'll direct this to Nikolay first, given the transportation constraints and high costs and limited storage. Will Ukrainian farmers prioritize specific crops for marketing, transit, and the same for storage in the coming months?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I can tell to you that farmers will stop product wheat and barley, and they will continue to produce only sunflower seeds and rapeseeds, because it's absolutely unprofitable. The price cost of production of wheat about $250 per ton. And with our average yield about 4.5 ton per hectare, the expense is a little bit more higher for wheat than $1,000, $1,200 per hectare. That's why for them it will be absolutely unprofitable. And I think they will concentrate to produce only oilseeds, which are more expensive. But the biggest problem that most of these farmers, even who will decrease the planting area, they will become to the bankrupt, because now they just kept all their stocks of cash. They just took credit lines from the state banks, because any commercial banks now give to them any credits. They cannot use international program which traders before gave to farmers with the crop protection products, fertilizer, with a prepayment, with a forward contract. Now it's not available program anymore. And I think more than 50% of farmers will become to the bankrupt on the next few months. And it will be the biggest challenge. Who will work on this land after? If we will not open ports now, after, we will get few years just to increase production on Ukraine.
So I guess just to follow up on that, I mean, if the current situation remains, exports are not open, would producers need some sort of support then, obviously, to incentivize more production, I guess, for next season?
Yeah, our farmers need support, and today was meeting on the European Commission, and as I know, the Casseral just opened the question about subsidizing of transportation of wheat, because I am afraid that all of us, we put about 10 million ton wheat export from Ukraine, but nobody will see this wheat because farmers will export oil seeds. And if we would like to feed up African country, we have to subsidize the transportation cost for wheat. I think it's only one reason when Ukrainian farmers will export wheat.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Seth, if you.
Yeah, no, I got a couple of questions. I think the first one I think is for Nikolay or maybe Lucas, and I'm thinking here, you know, we've talked about this storage constraint with the harvest of the spring crops. What kind of ad hoc storage? It looks like, short of an opening of the ports, that we will have a storage problem. What kind of ad hoc storage do you anticipate come October? And then I've got a follow-up, completely different question.
I think during one of the previous presentations, silo bags were mentioned. So that's something that we are seeing. So essentially a long bag that you can lay on a field and that you can fill with your crop. So that's certainly an option that's being used successfully in other countries. It's not ideal, especially in the summer months, but that's certainly I think an option which we are going to be seeing used in Ukraine.
So do we anticipate things like this comes up all the time, and I'm an Iowan. You could potentially leave the corn in the field and harvest it when you have diesel fuel, but there are losses associated that, and it certainly harms your cash flow too. Yeah,
no, I think unfortunately I expect that we will see Ukrainian farmers leaving crops on the field. But honestly, once something is harvested late, I question whether it will be harvested at all. Nikolay, I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh, I absolutely agree with Lucas that, in my opinion, about 50% of corn will not be harvested because here it's two questions. One is storage capacity, and second, you need to dry corn. And most of our dry is working by gas. From where we will take this gas? And what is the price for this gas will be during the October-November time? And about storage on silo bags or long sleeves, how it's called on South America, it's possible, and we use this technology on the past few years. But unfortunately, the factory which produce these silo bags located in Irpin near the Kiev, it is absolutely destroyed, and now we have to import it. It's not so easy to find this. That's why during my visit in Rome, when we had a conference call with FAO, we just talked to EBRD to participate to the program and subsidize our farmers to purchase these silo bags.
Aaron, if you'll forgive me, one more question. I'm going to kind of switch gears here.
Of course.
You know, we were talking about, you know, the motivation of the producers to produce oil seeds because there's more profit in this. And I wonder from your, and this is for any of the three of you, have we lost the crush capacity that we had within Ukraine? Because there would seem to be some incentive if you've got a limited transport capacity to transport the biggest value you can, which might be the vegetable oil. Or am I thinking about this wrong? Have we lost a lot of capacity, and that's what motivating seed exports, or is there something else that would keep us from crushing and exporting?
Okay, of course, we lost some crushing plant, but the problem again logistic, because these oil tanks they're on the same queue with barley, with wheat and oil seeds. And it's first, and second, it's dangerous to accumulate so many oil, and it looks like a tank for the diesel or petrol, and it can be destroyed by Russians, and it's dangerous. That's why most of the crushing plants are closed now. And if before we could export about 7 million tons of oil seeds, it's nearly 700,000 tons per month. For the moment, the best month we reach just 250. 1,000 tons, and we start to export not only oil for food, we start to export for the biodiesel, because unfortunately it's unpredictable time when our wagons just waiting for the crossing border. For example, I loaded wagons in April with the corn, and this wagon didn't cross Romanian border yet. It's more than 3 months. That's why the quality of this oil is just unpredictable as well. That's why it will decrease the price, and more profitable just to sell the seeds to Europe and crush oil there.
Excellent. Aaron, I could keep going, but I'm going to pass to you and see if you hit some of my same questions. And also, I think Joe would remind us all that if you have questions, put them in the Q&A function, because otherwise Aaron and I are going to get all our questions answered. Aaron?
Thanks. Yeah, switching gears a little bit again, this is kind of, I mean, talking about, you know, trying to get these grains out of the country. And this is a question for any of the participants. Again, you know, the EU has recently stated, you know, intentions to help Ukraine increase its exports via the European borders. Although there are some physical challenges to that, some bottlenecks, as Nikolay mentioned. If those challenges were to be able to physically be overcome, the logistical challenges of it, from an export point of view, is there issues or challenges with potentially competing with the EU's own export campaign? Are there any challenges there for that export pathway? I guess I'll give that first to Alex if you want to jump in from IGC's work on this.
Thank you, Erin. Yeah, from what we see from local sources, both in Europe and in Ukraine, most of the grain now goes to Romania, to the Constante port, and yes, that country is having its own harvest underway now. although wheat production is expected to be significantly lower compared to the previous year, there is still some export pipeline, and terminals will need to be used for local production. But at the other hand, we have seen also some, I would say, positive developments in this regard, and one of those is the new way of transshipment of Ukrainian grain from barges, which load directly from barges without using some infrastructure in the ports or terminals at the ports, storage capacity. So there are some developments in that regards, but yes, Romania is a major EU exporter, and it has its own export pipeline. We also have seen some information that what is being exported and delivered by trucks to the Constanta port, there was also a lack of parking lots for those trucks. So that's another limitation that would require some investment and some expansion at the port if that's to be resolved. Yeah, in terms of other ports in Bulgaria, Burgas, Varna, there have been reports of limited capacity at ports as well, and that country is also an exporter of wheat and maize.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Alex. Seth, I can hand it back over.
All right, I'm gonna. Hey, there's a lot going on here, and I think as we put this together fairly rapidly with a great set of panelists, but there's also some ongoing negotiations, and I think we have to bring this negotiations to open the port and ship grain out by the Odessa ports from Ukraine. So Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot here a bit, and I apologize because this is a bit of an open-ended question, which is, has the market priced in some probability of a successful negotiation? Do you think the market's positive about the negotiations? They'll price it in and the risk of a release of this grain. Do you think the market's priced it in, or where do you think we go should the negotiations prove positive? And then I think we got to go to the next step and say, even if negotiations were positively concluded today, how long would it take to actually have an effect? So Alex, I'll start it with you, and then I'll invite Lucas and Nikolay to jump in on that important question.
Thanks, Seth. That's a really global question and a tricky one, because I can say what we have seen in the market already, and there have been many factors, particularly in the wheat market, that have been influenced prices recently. We have seen a surge to multi-high through May, and then there was a retreat, and it started in May. I think it was even before negotiations started in earnest. One of the reasons for the initial decline was seasonal harvest pressure, because harvests were approaching in the Northern Hemisphere producers. Another factor that has been also pressuring markets is an extremely strong US dollar. And at the same time, there have also been some growing ideas about crop prospects in Russia. I think it's now at a record level, even despite sanctions. Also, expectations for exports from Russia have been growing. So there were the factors that were influencing and pressuring in some way the market, starting from May, apart from the negotiations. But indeed, we have seen pressure from particularly from the news of the negotiations. And on the day when this technical agreement was announced, I think it was on Wednesday, markets were declining. And now when we see that first another meeting was mentioned, now there are some I would say controversial stories about when this meeting is going to happen. Markets start to rise again. And what we can see from the commentary from the futures markets is that this renewed uncertainty about the positive outcome of that deal is underpinning the market again. So yes, there has been some pressure, particularly in the European Union. The EU has been absorbing most of the early season demand because of disrupted Black Sea supplies, and the largest decline, I would say, was there recently. And for your second part of the question, how long it might take, Well, it will also depend on the estimates of how much it will take to repair the infrastructure. If there is any damage, the extent of the damage, I think it's now is not entirely clear, and how much time it will take to demine. Because I've seen different estimates of how much it might take, from weeks to months. So if the market sees that it might take several months to demine and repair the infrastructure, of course the impact might be smaller on prices. But if as for example, I've seen some quite positive estimates from officials in Ukraine that it might take several weeks to really ramp up shipments from ports. So of course the impact on prices will be much stronger, and that will be a downward impact on prices. That's my opinion.
Okay, I agree absolutely with Alexander, and but I would like to add that for the demining, as I know from the people who are part of the negotiation, they discuss about 10 days and about 50 kilometers free zone from Russian ships. And I am quite positive. I am sure that the international community will find the solution and this agreement will be signed, because you see the food inflation in Europe now more than 7%, and it will increase again. Prices will go higher, and energy also increase in price, and energy inflation will be even doubled compared to food inflation, and no other solution. We have to find the way how to open ports. That's why I do believe. Additionally, I am sending the signal to the universe that we have to open the ports, no other solution. About how long it will take after the signing, I can tell to you that in our ports island now block from 3 up to 4 million tons of grain, and about 90% of infrastructure still be walkable, and we can load grain in 1 week, 10 days. It's not an issue. About demining, as I understood that on this corridor, it will not be Panamax vessel, but they discuss about handy-size vessel, but it's possible to find the way, safe corridor even now. It will not take a long time. I strongly believe that this agreement will be signed on this week, and Ukraine will continue to export. And in this case, price will go down, because if now farmers pay about $150, $180 per ton for logistic, and after it price will decrease in 5 times, that of course international price will decrease, because Ukraine will be able to export about 50 million tons of grain. It's nearly the 20% from total grain trade, corn and wheat together. Thank you.
If I may add a few things, there's always a lot of focus on Odessa as being the critical port which needs to be opened up, right? That's the name you always see mentioned in the media. And obviously Odessa is a very important port for the export of grain out of Ukraine. But the other ports are important too. You also need Nikolay, you also need Yuzhny, you also need Chernomorsk. And from what I understand, Odessa would be relatively simple to open up again. There's mines, which clearly are a concern, but like Nikolay was saying, there might be a safe passage through, or you can remove the mines. If you look at some of the other ports, Nikolaev is very close to Kherson, where the Ukrainian army has started a counteroffensive. So there's a lot of fighting going on in that area. And Yuzhny and Chernomorsk, as I understand it, are blocked by vessels which have been deliberately sunk by the Ukrainian army in the entrance channel. So those would need to be cleared. So I think in terms of time frame, it's going to take quite a while for all the ports to open up. And again, you need, or not all the ports, at least you need those 4 major ports in order to achieve the volumes that we have been achieving in the past. And another challenge I see is who is actually going to be shipping out of Ukraine? Because at the moment, it's next to impossible, or at least prohibitively expensive, to insure a vessel going into Ukraine, to insure the cargo coming out of Ukraine. Now, there will be companies that are prepared to take the risk. You see now people are also shipping grain out of the river ports, but these are smaller volumes, less risk. The companies that are active there might have a different risk appetite than some of the larger multinational companies that have been shipping the larger volumes in the past. So I think opening the ports would be fantastic. At least if we can get the 80 to 90 or so vessels which are stuck there, we can get out. But then the next steps are going to be quite complicated in my view, and we're going to need cooperation from the vessel owners, from the insurance markets, in order to get exports started up again. And perhaps there is a role there to play for the UN or for the European Commission as well.
Seth, if I may follow up on that question. So I guess to that point, if the negotiations are successful and these ports are able to be opened, would that, I guess there's two questions. First is that those additional risks now, Lucas, that you just mentioned, would that possibly increase the freight costs then? Would you foresee that making the shipments even more expensive at that time? And secondly, would the opening of the ports, in terms of the impact, and we just discussed the impact on global markets a little bit, in terms of the impact on Ukraine's domestic market, would that, I mean, in terms of how it possibly higher international prices transmitting to Ukraine's domestic prices, also with the shipment of food out, would that cause any concerns for food security domestically for Ukraine?
So to your first question, yes, the higher insurance costs would absolutely result in a higher cost for the grain on the world markets. I mean, the cost that the vessel owner pays to insure his vessel are passed on to the charter of a vessel in the freight rate that is paid. The cost for insuring the commodity itself is part of the price being paid by the receiver of the commodity. So that isn't a potential issue if those costs don't come down. Though it seems at the moment, at least, availability of the insurance is the issue, because you simply can't buy it. So then it becomes a question of, are you prepared to take the risk? You know, a cargo worth anywhere between $15 and $30 million to ship that uninsured. And that's not even talking about the vessel. Can you find a vessel owner willing to send his ship into Ukrainian ports? Your second question concerning food security is a very interesting one. Frankly, I don't have the answer. Nikolay, do you have a view on that?
About ship security, nobody will give any guarantee, but I think insurance should cover this, and some company now already on the market, they're trying to find even international from top 5, from ABCD, they're trying to find the ships, the vessels which can come to Ukraine, and what is the price available on the market for the moment.
Thanks. Seth, I pass it back to you.
If I could also add to that, yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the potential impact on domestic prices, of course, I've just noted out some figures that Nikolay mentioned in his presentation of increasing cost of delivery from farm to the port now, which is around $160, $180 per ton, compared to what was previously $35, $40. Yeah, given that the major part is now a cost of delivery to the port before forwarding costs and before shipment. So that definitely should allow traders to offer better prices to farmers. But as I understand, also for farmers, it's not only the question of selling the grain at a better price, but selling the grain at all, because they need to get funds to purchase inputs for the next harvest. And yeah, that my threat is that if the grain is not moved, and in terms of also the impact on the global market, I think in our forecast now, the ending stocks for total grains in Ukraine by the end of this season is slightly more than 20 million tons. So that's potentially what can be additionally moved during this season. And this does not assume all crop supplies of slightly more than 20 million tons, which I mentioned also in my presentation. So it's a very significant volume, but I think the impact on the maize market and the wheat market in particular will be different, because in the maize market, well, probably the price effect will be smaller. And we've seen recently that it was actually the wheat market that led the price increase globally. because for the maize market, what we are seeing now is a declining crop IDs in Europe because of scorching heat and also some adverse weather, adverse outlooks for the US maize and not only maize but also soybeans. So some of the volume which will come from Ukraine will potentially be absorbed by the European Union, and we also seen already China buying new crop maize, Ukrainian maize from Constanta. And if ports are reopened, potentially some additional volumes will be absorbed by China. And these two destinations are the major buyers of Ukrainian maize. So I would assume that a large portion of additional supplies would be absorbed by the European Union and China if that happens. While in the wheat market, it will be the geography of deliveries will be more diversified, and particularly to Africa and the Middle East, the countries will get more supplies. Okay.
Okay, I think this is a testament to some of the technical folks online listening to this conversation, which is I think great. They're getting down into some of the details, and so maybe this is a question for you, Lucas, or maybe Nikolay, which is, I think it is not that this is a huge issue, but I think it reflects the logistical challenges, which are, is there a quality issue with the additional handling of grain that we're seeing through this process? Is that an issue? Would we see additional quality issues depending upon the kind of port agreement that is open? Would that improve any issue with logistical challenges with cost? The more you handle grain, the more you've got problems in terms of breakage, etc. So, what do you see as the problems now? Would the ports, depending on the agreement, improve that? Or is this not, it's so far down in the weeds that it's not an issue at all?
In terms of quality, I don't have any major concerns. You're right, of course, the more you handle grain, the more the quality deteriorates. But even with the extra handling steps that have been introduced in the supply chain here and there, we don't see any issue with the corn or whatever commodity arriving at destination. What is a concern is the deterioration over time. So goods which are stuck in storage, in elevators, onboard vessels in the ports. That's particularly with the hot weather now is a concern. And food safety might be a concern here and there. We saw the pictures of the fields in Nikolay's presentation. Missiles hitting the fields, etc. It can result in certain contaminants being present in the grain. There are concerns about drying. If goods are not properly dried, they might be stored in too wet a condition. They might develop mycotoxins. Or because gas is not available for drying or it is too expensive, maybe somebody is using fuel for drying which is not suitable, which can also result in contaminants in the commodity. So I'm not so worried about the quality per se, except if this situation persists and we can't move more cargo out. But I do have some concerns on the food safety side.
Okay, I'm going to build off your last question before I kick it back to you, Aaron, which is, if you said if this continues, right? We're talking now out here, not so many months until Ukrainian farmers have to make some decisions for winter crops and then spring crops. And I'm not hearing a huge amount of optimism about the ability, without the ports open, to ship more than 2.5 million metric tons a month. To me, that really reflects that without a solution, to Nikolay's point, Ukrainian farmers are going to have to rationalize production down to the amount that they can export and consume domestically, which would mean a further cut in production. Am I thinking about this right? Without the ability to export, you're going to have to rationalize production. Yep. And it's going to happen through price.
I think that's accurate. It won't, like Nikolay was saying, you won't necessarily see them not growing anything, but they might grow other crops. So they might focus on oilseeds rather than wheat.
And are there challenges when you think about that? So when I think about oilseeds, when I think about sunflower compared to wheat, and I'm from Iowa, so what do I know about sunflower or wheat? But you got to think about, there's a little bit more input cost associated with it. Corn's a little bit easier to store and handle, I think, than sunflower, maybe. So I think that presents some real challenges. I mean, and you're still talking about producers having to invest cash flow in a crop come spring that might be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aaron, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Thanks. Kind of staying in that same area. I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but just to hear maybe some more details on what is the availability of fuel, fertilizer, and seeds for farmers going into planting.
For the moment, it's the most difficult question to the farmers. And on our conference call with the Ministry of Agriculture, we start to discuss about the volume of fertilizer which we can import from European Union, for example. And we discussed that about 1.5 million ton maximum logistically we can import. But after our producer of fertilizer start to discuss, okay, but why for we have to import? We can produce some fertilizer in our country. I say just it's no point to discuss about fertilizer for the moment because no one will purchase this fertilizer. We will not find the demand for this fertilizer because farmers, they are nearly bankrupt and they will not use fertilizer anymore before we will not find the logistic with which will connect with economical way of production the grain. And if before all traders use their own program, we pre-finance farmers, we gave them cash on a forward contract, we gave them prepayment in crop protection products, seeds and fertilizer. For the moment, all this program are closed and farmers has to prepay everything. That's why I expect that on a soon future we'll have, if we will not open the port, we'll have decreasing of yield in Ukraine because will be another quality of seeds and will be changing in technology of production. Because any banks now agree to finance this, it's absolutely unpredictability. As Seth says that it's economically reasonable that farmers will produce only that volume which they will be able to sell on domestic market plus export. No one will store the double capacity of the crop.
So I'm going to follow up one more, and Joe, and I'll remind everybody, if you've got questions, keep putting them in the Q&A here. Alex, I guess in kind of bringing this discussion back to the global market, I'm listening to Lucas and I'm listening to Nikolay, and it really does look as if it is an export constrained market for the Ukrainians. They'll have to rationalize production short of opening the ports. That means that means the potential that this is out of the market. This grain is out of the market until this is resolved. So I guess in your view, you were talking a little bit about the price movements. The market's obviously rationalizing this. What do you think the market is most focusing on? And you can use wheat as your example. What is the market most focusing on today in giving it guidance for prices? Do you think it's largely figured out this? Or said we're incorporating this uncertainty for the Ukraine market? What are they looking at today? What are they looking at over the next 6 months to give it guidance for where prices are headed?
Yeah, I would say that of course these developments surrounding the four-way talks are developing is the focus for the market now. So when there is more clarity about whether that deal is reached or not, and where or when it can be reached, what time it will require to demine the ports and ramp up exports, I would say it's the analysis of what is coming from the harvests, particularly in the US, also in Russia. So the market is now looking on the harvest arrivals, as well as looking at what is happening with the Ukrainian situation. But at the same time, on the demand side, as I said, the European Union has been absorbing much of demand, but previously we saw major importers slowing their purchases. And this likely suggests that there has been some rationing in consumption in those countries, which I think is unlikely, particularly for the wheat market, because if we talk about some North African or Middle East countries, this is a very sensitive issue in terms of consumption of wheat in the domestic market. So most likely those countries were using their domestic reserves. So what we expect now, and as I've seen from various reports, that some major exporters were also expecting some break in prices when new harvests start to come online, particularly in the EU. They were waiting for a drop in prices, or at least a slowing in increases in prices to ramp up their purchases. But in fact, now we haven't seen that. And what is happening to domestic stocks in those countries is a really big question now. It's potentially becoming very tight, but we haven't seen a major upturn in demand globally, even though harvests are coming online. As I said, the European Union is probably the only origin that has seen very significant increase. But there are some explanations to that. In particular, for example, Australia has some capacity limitations. We've seen that so there are supplies there, but the capacity is constrained, and loading capacity is booked several months ahead now. So Australia cannot ramp up shipments. I would say for Canada and the US, the question of freight rates has been very significant. We've seen now that freight rates have generally been falling. And if you look at grains and oilseeds, freight rates is now around 25% down year on year. So that might help increase exports from North America. But yes, I think we still need to monitor what is happening on the demand side, because what we see now looks like rationing of demand, even during the harvest period, which is really concerning. Yeah, so I would probably stop there for this question.
Well, and before I kick it back to you, Aaron, Joe, I'm hearing a couple more seminars. I'm hearing demand side pressure seminar maybe, and then I'm always interested in our own, we're in a weather market here in North America as well too. So by August, we'll start to get a better picture on where our own corn and bean markets are at. And we've seen some movement along those with wheat. So I'm hearing those too. Aaron, you got another one you want to follow up with?
No, just to, I guess, comment to follow up on what Alexander's mentioned, just to say that from our point of view, FAO AMIS's forecast also, we expected to see kind of in wheat markets, at least in Africa and Asia, a lot of the importers kind of relying more on their stocks and seeing kind of some dampened import demand from those two major importing regions for wheat. However, with the fall of prices seasonally, we were kind of curious to see if that trend might, if they might start to purchase more or pick up, as Alexander mentioned, and we just haven't. So it seems to be, for now, the forecast seems to be kind of holding that a potential drawdown in stocks, relying more on stocks in those two importing regions. But again, this could change, obviously, if negotiations are successful for Ukraine to start exporting and more supplies on the market, which hopefully alleviates some pressure on prices. That could possibly change. So just to close it off there.
No, that's great. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, let me jump in because we're rapidly running out of time, and so we're going to have to shut this down. Just a couple of housekeeping things. I think you'll see in the chat that the webinar will be available on YouTube, so that should be easy. We're going to work on getting up PowerPoints. We need to talk to everyone about that to make sure everyone's comfortable with that, but hopefully we'll be able to get some up in any event. And yes, I think we got a lot more grist to work through. I think, particularly with, as you say, a lot going on in the markets above and beyond Ukraine in terms of weather and everything else going on in North America and Europe, and like there always is, but this is particularly when stocks are low, you get a lot of volatility, and I think that's certainly what we're seeing. we did get a couple of questions in the chat right at the end. I don't know. One is on what share of crop production depends on foreign direct investment. And has that been an issue? Nikolay, maybe you can treat that, but I think we'll shut this down after that question and pick it up. Go ahead.
Oh, so many opportunity, so many possibility, but you see with this Russian invasion, I don't know what will happen, and nobody from us can do any plan. All our token, it's our expectation. It's 10 million ton of corn export, 10 million ton of wheat export, but in reality, we will see we can see absolutely another number, and of course, it will be better to talk, as Seth said, somewhere in August, September, and we will see how it will be possible to find the solution with open import, and maybe we'll have more clear picture with the farmers. What will they do? Will they decrease dramatically the seeds area? Everything. I don't know what will happen, and any conclusions for the moment can be wrong. We have not exact information which can help to us to make any plan for the future. For Ukraine now is one target, it's survive. And of course we'll concentrate on this, and I would like to use this opportunity and say to all of Western world, all civil world who help us to protect our interest, and I am sure Ukraine will continue to grow the grain how we did in 1941 and 1942 and 1945, and we will continue to grow grain in any case. Thank you.
Great. All right. I think we should probably think about winding this down. This was excellent, and I really want to thank, in particular, Alexei Poulin and Dennis Drexler at AMIS for helping organize this, and my good colleague Arnaud Petit, who's executive director of the International Grains Council. This was essentially we got the idea to do this after some discussions, and I think this has just been excellent. I've learned a lot, and again, this all will be available online, and again, stay tuned. We hope to have more seminars like this. And with that, let me say goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.